that day forward, neither the force of our will nor the force of our air power was any further called into doubt or question.
Welcome to my vintage G-Shock review featuring the DW6700, the Skyforce. I call it the Skyforce 2 because there was a DW6500 which was released about 6 months earlier. This is, we're talking about the year 1994. That's when the Skyforce G-Shocks were released. And the DW6500 was released in February, whereas this was released in September. So what you're looking at here is the export version of the DW6700 Skyforce. I believe that this is the only version that was sold outside of Japan. Within the country, if you shopped in Japan, there were two different versions. There was a greenish yellow, or kind of a green-yellow combination, and there was also a purplish version. Now what you have with this export version, if you look on the case back here, you see it'll be in the top left right here, 1230. That's module 1230, made in Japan. So I'm guessing that because of government regulations within Japan, it wasn't permissible, it wasn't legal for CASIO to sell a wristwatch to the domestic market that had switchable units of measurement. They had to be metric only. So what CASIO did back then is they produced a version for sale inside Japan, and then they produced another version to export. So the versions of the DW6700 that were sold inside Japan have module 1231, and that's a metric-only module. You cannot switch to, as you notice here, I just switched it into barometer mode, and it's giving the temperature in Fahrenheit and the barometric pressure in INHG, or inches of mercury. And that's what we're familiar with here in the USA. So this version with module 1230 is switchable between imperial and metric units. And I'll show you how to do that later. So this is the bezel here. This looks like it might be some sort of like screw-on cap. It's not. It's just a molded piece of the bezel. These screws here, I don't believe they do anything. It's not a separate piece. It's all one piece bezel. The case extends out to here. This is where the bezel separates with the case. And there is a sensor that reaches out, towards this end of the watch, but that's inside the case. It's pretty standard G-Shock construction. It has a simple round O-ring gasket on the case back, 4-screw back plate design, and the bezel is held on by these screws here, 2 on each side, like most G-Shocks. And it's only a 4-button, even though it's a twin sensor. So that was the big thing. This is the first twin sensor G-Shock. Unlike the DW6500, which only had a pressure sensor, this DW6700 has both temperature and pressure. Now, I think everyone expected that there would be a triple sensor G-Shock, or ABC, in the not too distant future, because that same year in 1994, CASIO released the ATC 1000, which was basically the progenitor of the ProTrek, later became known as the ProTrek series, which is which as I say, it was a triple sensor CASIO watch, but it wasn't shock resistant, so it wasn't a G-Shock. It was just like all ProTreks, they're just triple sensor ABC wristwatches without the enhanced shock resistance that you have with a G-Shock. But alas, it wasn't until 18 years later, as I mentioned in my Rangeman review, it wasn't until late 2013 when the Rangeman was released that we finally got a triple sensor ABC G-Shock, altimeter, barometer, compass. So this just might be the biggest G-Shock ever made. It's not the heaviest. It's not as heavy as the Rangeman, but it's a couple millimeters wider. It's about 55.5 millimeters from side to side. It's 76.2 grams in weight because it doesn't have a lot of metal in it. It's mostly resin construction. It has a resin case, bezel, and straps. It's about 19.2 millimeters thick, 55.5 millimeters wide, and it's about 52.7 millimeters in height from, in this direction. So I'll just put it on my wrist here. If you wear your wristwatch on your left hand, as most right-handed people do, it's kind of asymmetrical and it extends out in this direction more than this direction. So, given the fact that it's lightweight and it extends out this way, it's actually pretty comfortable. Probably more comfortable than the Rangeman because of its lighter weight. Got plenty of extra straps, so it can certainly fit large wrists. It's definitely a manly G-Shock. So here it is compared to a DW9052. I mean, this is kind of a common G-Shock size. So it's substantially bigger than that. Altathermo. It's got a single tang buckle and strap, two-piece strap. The standard 16 millimeter spring bars there. Hold the strap on. So this is could be thought of as the father of the Riseman. In fact, the first Riseman actually, from what I understand, has the exact same functionality, except I think it has electroluminescent backlight. This being 1994. Actually, it just preceded the release of the DW6600, which had the EL backlight, but this has a little micro light. It's just a lamp off to one side there. It works fairly well as far as micro lights go, but not as good as EL. So Skyforce, when you hear that, you think maybe Air Force, and you picture a squadron of B-17 bombers flying through the air or something. Actually, what Skyforce refers to is air pressure, the force of the sky. As you may know, air actually has weight, and just as pressure gets higher, the deeper you go underwater, the deeper into the atmosphere or the closer to sea level. Actually, there are places on Earth where you can go below sea level, I guess. The air pressure increases because you've got more air above you weighing down. So it's the weight of the air, the pressure of the air, the force of the sky. And that's what, the DW6500 and this DW6700 both measure. They measure air pressure. So you have it says memory here, but this button is what is used to put the watch into the barometer temperature mode. And it has a graph up here showing the barometric pressure tendency. And you can sort of use that to predict the weather, provided that your altitude hasn't been changing. If you're climbing a mountain and your altitude is changing, then you can't really use this as a weather predictor. But if your altitude is staying steady, then this graph will kind of dropping pressure means that the weather's probably going to get worse. And if it's rising, showing a rising trend, it tells you that your weather's probably going to be getting better. And it shows absolute pressure here. So this will not jive with what you see on your internet, or your weather forecast on TV, because they use sea level pressure. They use sea level adjusted pressure, which basically takes altitude out of the equation so that you can compare a wide geographical area, one location to the next, to see where the low pressure systems are and high pressure systems and so on. And you press it again, that shows you your day of the week, and then the year, month, and day of the month. And this mode button over here on the bottom left, it tells you how many records you have free out of their 50. There are 50 memory slots, which will record the pressure, temperature, date, time, altitude, etc. And so this is your altimeter mode. And there's a bunch of stuff you could do here. It also shows the temperature in here. It'll start taking readings. As you can see, it's accumulating readings here. I think it's like every 5 seconds it gets another reading. And this is your recall mode. And you can have it automatically take readings and store them in here, or you can just have it set to manual, in which case every time when you're in the altimeter mode and you press and hold the memory button here, it will manually record an altitude reading to memory. So in your recall mode here, it'll show you the minimum altitude. And these are just records showing the date at which the record was stored, and it shows you your maximum altitude. So if you use the mode, it automatically goes to back to the home screen when you press mode. So there's recall mode again. This is alarm mode. You have 5 daily alarms. And there's also hourly chime. You can turn that on or off. Alarm mode, stopwatch. It's just a standard, 1/100th of a second stopwatch. That is it for the modes. You can hear it has a different pitch when you get back to the home screen. It's a little bit brighter, higher pitched beep. It does not have button muting. So, a lot of the newer G-Shocks give you the option to mute the sound, but this doesn't have that. It does have quite a bit of functionality, though, compared to G-Shocks, which came previous to this. So in conclusion, let's take a look at the illumination. I'll turn off some of the lights here. It has a fairly bright little micro lamp there. So it's pretty effective. You might have to tilt the watch at an angle to see it, to read it, but it's fairly effective. It does, maybe another micro lamp on the other side would be better, but then you'd probably wear the battery down a lot faster. Okay, so let's get all caught up in the particulars here. Up here in this area, you've got a dot matrix display. Over in these areas, there are a bunch of different indicators that nothing's being displayed right now, but depending on what features you have activated, there's different stuff that you'll see later that can appear in these other little side windows. And of course here you've got the year, month, day of the month, and it's currently in 24-hour. You can switch this between 12 and 24-hour display mode. So this is 24-hour time, hours, minutes, seconds, of course. The light button up here, it's 4 buttons, so you've got 2 on each side. The light button just turns on the little micro lamp, which you probably can't really see. Then the button down here in the bottom, memory button, switches between sort of the normal display mode and the barometric mode or barometer mode, which shows the temperature and the absolute barometric pressure. And of course you still got the time here. When you're in the normal time display and you press and hold the adjust button up here at the top left for a couple of seconds, it puts you into the adjustment mode, and of course you can reset and adjust hours, minutes, seconds. You can change the year. It has a full auto calendar. It's good up to the year 2029. It starts at 1990 and goes to 2029. And you can adjust your month, go up and down using the 2 right side buttons, day of the month, and then we're back to seconds. And when you have the seconds flashing, if you press the light button, that'll switch you between 12-hour time and 24-hour time. So you can see the PM indicator there. There's 24-hour time. So in regard to settings and adjustments, if you change to barometer mode by pressing the memory button down here, and then you press and hold the adjust button for a couple of seconds, you'll get some other settings. What you can do here is using the 2 right side buttons, you can calibrate your thermometer. So if you believe that your thermometer is not giving you an accurate reading, you can calibrate it. You want to compare it to maybe at least a couple of other thermometers and make sure that they're not in the sun. You know, direct sunlight will cause the thermometer to read incorrectly. So you want to make sure that you really know that your watch is off before you calibrate it. When it shows the word off here, it means that there is no calibration. So you can go up or down. So if it's off, then it just goes with the factory calibration. If you press both buttons at the same time, it will take you to the factory calibration, which is indicated by the word off. So now if I press the mode button, it goes over here to the barometric pressure calibration. And again, you can go up or down with that if you're sure that it's not giving you a correct reading. Remember, it measures absolute pressure, not sea level adjusted pressure. So it's always going to be probably lower than what you see on your weather station. You know, like weather forecast or weather channel or weather web page. And again, if you press both right side buttons at the same time, it'll turn off and restore the factory default. Now I'll press the mode button again, and now you can see the little degrees Fahrenheit is flashing. And this is where you can change your unit of measurement for temperature. So you can have Celsius or Fahrenheit. I'll press the mode button again, and you see inches, HG, inches of mercury is flashing. So you can change that to hectopascals, which is the same thing as millibars. So hectopascal, millibar, or inches of mercury. Those are your 2 options. And press the mode button again. And this is altitude. So you can change your units of measurement between meters or feet. So then press the adjust button again, and that takes you out of that settings. So let's take a look at the barometer mode. Of course, it shows you the temperature here, absolute air pressure, time. The units are Fahrenheit and inches of mercury. This is just showing the same sort of eye candy animation right here. Up here in the dot matrix graph, near as I can tell, there are 10 lines and something like 26, 10 by 26 resolution. So what's happening is this watch, this G-Shock, automatically takes a pressure reading every 2 hours, regardless of, as long as the watch has a functioning battery in it, then it's going to take a reading every 2 hours. And that's what is displayed here. And it goes back in time 26 hours, according to the manual. So each one of these dots, when it moves up, that represents, when it moves up or down, it represents 0.05 inches of mercury or 1 hectopascal. And there's a limited range of the display. It measures between 13.55 and 32.45 inches of mercury. So if there's an extreme drop in barometric pressure or an extreme increase, then you may not see anything. This flashing dot represents the most current reading. So if you don't see anything, then it's outside the range. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for explaining this mode. And I already showed you how to use the adjust button and change the you can do a calibrate your temperature, your barometric pressure, change your units. So that's all there is to it. This is just a history and trend graph for barometric pressure that can allow you to make weather predictions, assuming that your altitude has not changed during the last several hours. So now for the tough one, the altimeter mode. So you press the mode button over here on the bottom left, and the first mode you come to is the altimeter mode. And you might have noticed it said free 48. If you press and hold the mode button for a couple of seconds, it'll automatically go back to the home screen. So I'll do this again. Free 48. That tells you how many memory records are free. And that's important to know if you're going to use automatic logging. You see this little Alti symbol here flashing. It does that for the first 3 minutes, because what it does is it takes a reading every 5 seconds for the first 3 minutes. I don't know, maybe some situations if you're climbing stairs to a tall building and you want to have the reading updated quickly, or maybe you're going up an elevator or something, none of these readings are stored into the memory. It's just a fast update sort of a thing. After the first 3 minutes, it will begin taking a reading every 2 minutes instead of every 5 seconds. So I tried to count these as best I could. There appears to be 14 columns in this dot matrix, and there's 10 rows. So it's a 10 by 14 dot matrix display here. And basically what it does is it centers the display on whatever altitude reading. Now, it says 0 feet. That's because I entered a 0 feet reference. My actual elevation in Cheyenne, Wyoming is about 6,060 feet. The way that this altimeter works is it uses barometric pressure. And that means that it just estimates your elevation or altitude based on that pressure. And the other thing that changes pressure is weather. So if you have a low pressure system, as they call it, or a storm system move in, that will change the altitude reading that the watch gives, because it's basically deceived by the weather-related changes in air pressure. That's why it's very helpful to enter a reference altitude as often as possible. Now, the display range is 0 to 19,680 feet, or 0 to 6,000 meters. Now, that doesn't mean that it becomes useless if you're climbing a mountain that's taller than that, because you're going to want to keep a paper log, or maybe something on a smartphone anyway, to keep track of your records, because you get a limited memory here. So what you can do is, let's say you start off at a base camp and what the elevation. There might even be a sign at the base camp, or you can get it from a map, or it's probably in the planning stages of a major climb like that. You're going to know the elevation of the base camp, so you can just zero out your reference altitude at the base camp, and so it's relative. You're doing relative altitude measuring, I guess. That's what it's called. And then you can add the elevation of the base camp to get the the total altitude. So each one of these pixels on the display represents 10 meters or 40 feet. So it just shows changes. Now you can see that it's varying a little bit, and I don't know why that would be. Maybe the air pressure is changing in my apartment for whatever reason. But another thing is you want to keep the temperature stable, which usually isn't a problem if you're wearing the watch on your wrist. The internal case temperature will probably remain fairly stable. So you can see the Alti has stopped flashing, so now it's taking a reading every 2 minutes. So what I want to do now is go into the settings by pressing and holding the adjust button. And it takes a few minutes to find its way here. Now you can see this is flashing. This is how you set your reference altitude. And you can go into the negative. So that's another, if you want to be able to measure like from sea level all the way to the top of Mount Everest, you could like set this to negative 10,000 feet or something at the start. If you press both of the right side buttons at the same time, it will go to the factory default calibration, and that's indicated by the word off there. Now if I press the mode button, this allows you to set an altitude alarm. And when you have an altitude alarm set, the alarm will sound every time you pass the value set in the alarm. So if you're going down past the value, it'll sound the alarm, or if you're going up to past the value, it will sound the alarm. And you can see the indicator over here. This is the altitude alarm symbol. Lets you know that it's turned on. And again, if you press both the right side buttons, it'll turn it off. If you have the alarm turned on, it also activates a target altitude graph right in here that basically lets you know how many tenths of the way toward your target, between your current altitude and your alarm altitude, it'll show, how many tenths of the way there you are. Okay, so press the mode button again, and you can see this tiny word manual here. You can switch that using the right side memory button here. You can switch it between auto and manual. Now that tiny little word auto is virtually impossible to see with the naked eye. I mean, I can barely see it wearing magnifying goggles. It's very, very, very tiny. You basically have to know that the top, is auto, and then the next one down is manual, because it's very difficult to read. So, that's all of the settings that there are in the altitude mode. So I'm going to press the adjust button here. So when you have it set to manual, the only way that a reading, now you can see it says 6,000 feet. That's pretty close. And that's probably because of the weather being sort of close to neutral, I guess, in terms of barometric pressure. But when you have it set to manual, the only way to record these readings, and it records altitude, temperature, and date and time, the only way to record is to press the memory button down here on the bottom right and hold it, and you hear that double beep there. So it just stored this reading into memory. One thing I should say, the manual is available for, it's very difficult to cover the entire, there's a lot of complexity and detail that the manual describes that's can't really be squeezed into a YouTube video. The manual is available for download from CASIO support. It's just look up for module 1230. You just enter the module number 1230, and it'll bring up the English PDF manual. So like I mentioned before, it's on manual now, but there's also an auto option, which will automatically store readings to the memory every 15 minutes. And if you clear the memory so that you have a full, 49 or 50 available memory slots, this would be like before you start your climb, then you have enough memory for 12 hours and 15 minutes, I think, of readings. It'll take a reading every 15 minutes and store it to memory. Now, what it'll do is when it runs out of memory, if you go to recall mode, it'll show the word full. Well, actually, I think it'll show that in altimeter mode as well. It'll show the word full on the screen, and it will stop storing readings. It won't replace the oldest with the newest, like some CASIO watches do. But it'll just stop taking readings altogether and show the word full on the screen. The way to put it into auto mode is to press and hold the adjust button, and then you hit the mode button until you see this flashing up here. So now it's in auto. You can see the tiny little indicator auto there. Press the adjust button again. So now what will happen if you press the bottom right button here, you have to hold it until you hear beep. Okay, so now both Alti and Auto are flashing. So it's going to store the reading in memory automatically until it runs out of memory. And it will do that regardless of what mode you're in. So I can switch to, any other mode, and you see the auto is still flashing up here. So it's still going to take those altitude readings every 15 minutes. So to deactivate this auto recording, you need to go to the altimeter mode and then press and hold the bottom right button here till you hear the beep tones, and then it freezes. I think that's all you need to know for the altimeter mode. But there's a lot of detail in the manual that's not covered. I can't really cover it in a YouTube video. Okay, let's talk about the recall mode specifically. The recall mode is kind of integrated with the altimeter mode. So when you first go to the altimeter mode, you'll see the number of records that are free in the memory. 48 free. So that means 2 of them are used because there's a total of 50. And I'll press the mode button down here again. And so now I'm in recall mode. It's showing the maximum reading. It also shows the date that the reading was taken and the time that the reading was taken. And it records the altitude and the temperature. And you can use the 2 right side buttons to go from one record to the next. So this is basically the last record that was recorded, the final record. Let's go back to max. It also shows the minimum reading. So I've got a max reading of 5,980 feet and a minimum of minus 20. So this would be the first record in the database. And then there's the final. So there's only 2 records total. It also shows you what type of record it is, whether it was a reading that was automatically recorded, or I guess they're both automatically recorded, or whether it was a manually recorded reading. Apparently you can record more than one series of auto recordings, and that's what I've got in here now. So each time you initiate the auto recording sequence when you're in altimeter mode, it creates a new series, assuming there's enough memory slots available. So once you go past the minimum here, so this shows auto. This is the first record. This is the second and final record in this auto record series. And now it's showing auto. This is a new auto record series. And this is the second and final record in the new auto record series. And now we've got the manual record. And there's just one of those. And pressing and holding the adjust button until you hear a solid beep, that clears the record. And it's the same thing with these auto record. If you go to the first record in the series and press and hold, it will clear that entire series. So now there's just these 2 readings that were taken at 9:46. So I'll press and hold. Okay, so now everything except the min and max. Now, I don't think the min and max actually consumes any of your memory. Yeah, so it shows 50 free. But you can also clear that min and max by pressing and holding the adjust button as well. So you can set you can reset the minimum and maximum altitude. So now everything is, if you press and hold the right side buttons, everything is cleared out, zeroed out, and you get 50 free memory slots. I think, oh yeah, there's one other thing. If you have a bunch of records in here, the graph will actually show you sort of a visual representation of the differences or changes in altitude. It says the altitude graph divides by 10 the difference between the maximum and minimum altitudes achieved during auto memory measurement and shows relative changes. So that's another bonus feature that you have in the recall mode. And I think that's everything there is to know about the recall mode. Now some easy stuff. The alarm mode. It's the third mode that you come to. There's 5 daily alarms and they're numbered down here. And pressing the bottom right button takes you from one alarm to the next. You want to be mindful of the AM/PM indicators when you're setting the alarm. None of the alarms have a snooze feature, so they just, when you hit the alarm time, the beeping sound goes off for about 20 seconds. This is the hourly chime, and I think you use the light button. Yeah, so the light button up here will show this tiny little bell symbol, which means that the chime is turned on. So it'll just give you a double beep at the top of the hour. You can't change. It's always at the top of the hour. So it's pretty straightforward. You press and hold the adjust button for a couple of seconds. That automatically turns the alarm on. And whatever digits are flashing, you can adjust up or down using the 2 right side buttons. So now it's set for 6 a.m. I like that it does have an AM indicator there. And a PM indicator. If you press and hold the buttons, it'll speed scroll. Pressing the mode button over here will take you to the minutes. And again, you can use the 2 right side buttons to go up or down. So now alarm 1 is set for 6 a.m. Alarm 2 set for midnight, 12 a.m. And it's the same thing, press and hold the adjust button, and you can. So when it's not flashing, if you press the light button, you can turn the alarm off. So let's go back to alarm 1. I don't want that alarm on, so I'll press the light button. And when you see this symbol disappear, that means that this alarm is turned off. So use the memory button here, go through all of the alarms. They're all turned off. Good. And that's it. The only other thing is if you press and hold the memory button, that's an alarm test feature. So that just lets you know that it's working. The beeper's working. So the fourth and final mode is the stopwatch mode. I actually already covered this because it's so simple. It's just your standard CASIO stopwatch. It doesn't have any additional features like auto start or anything. You got start, stop down here and reset up here on the light button. So you started it and it shows the hundredths of a second here, seconds, minutes, hours. It's a 24-hour, 23 hours and 59 minutes and 59.99 seconds. I believe it keeps running once it goes to, it keeps cycling indefinitely. So if you press the stop button again, that's your total elapsed time, 29 seconds, 29.12 I should say seconds. Press the light button, resets it to 0. I'll start it again. So you can also use the light button to do split times. You can see the word or the abbreviation split there. So 4 seconds flat, 4 seconds even is a split time. And it just freezes the display, and the stopwatch is still running in the background as evidenced by the animation here. So when you press this button again, it shows the elapsed time, the current elapsed time. And you can keep doing this as many times as you like. You'll have to write these values down. So if you want to do a first and second place finish, you hit the split button for first place and then the stop button for the second place. So now you've got your first place finish frozen here. You need to write that down. So when I press the light button again, or the reset button, it shows the 50.29 seconds, the final. This would be the second place finish. And then pressing the reset button again resets it to 0. And that's it. So I want to show you a couple of additional features that I'm going to put this into the display test. No, the 2 left side buttons plus the memory button puts you into the display test. So this just lights up everything that is possible to display on the screen. And you'll notice down here you have battery and error. So if your battery level is low, your altimeter may not work correctly. A lot of things may not work correctly. So if you see error, this could mean that the temperature dropped too low, and you've had a sensor malfunction, so your data may not be valid if you see this. And of course this lets you know that it's time to replace the battery. This might be caused by cold as well, if it's extreme cold and you don't have the watch on your wrist. Yeah, in the manual it says if the appearance of the battery message is caused by extremely low temperature, the message should clear from the display when normal temperature returns. It is recommended, however, that you still have the watch checked by the authorized CASIO distributor or service center. So there you have it. That's the CASIO G-Shock DW6700 Skyforce, or Skyforce 2. The DW6500 is the Skyforce 1. You know, it's the daddy of the Rise Man, essentially. The first twin sensor G-Shock. And it's very macho, it's large, and yet it's lightweight and comfortable. It is complicated, and it's not exactly self-explanatory, so if you study the manual and practice, you'll probably get a handle on how everything works, but remembering all of that 6 months or a year or two later is another story. So if you suddenly find yourself in a hiking situation, you know, after years since you read the manual, you probably aren't going to know how to do much of anything. But anyway, it's cool. And most of all, it looks awesome. I hope you enjoyed this historical vintage review of the DW6700, and thank you for liking and subscribing if you do, and I'll see you probably fairly soon with a couple of more G-Shock reviews.